this book. As someone who has been running away from Filipino studies, I have been busy doing work on it. The latest iteration of which is my participation in this book. And I want to explain that. Despite my best attempts to run away, I continue to gravitate towards this literature, particularly work that deals with Filipinos in Canada, to make sense of my own personal and familial histories. How and why my dad's cousins came to Vancouver in the 70s, how and why my maternal aunt moved first to Hong Kong and then to Vancouver in the 80s to work as a domestic worker, why my immediate family followed in the 90s, and why I'm here in Toronto. It is partly through this literature that I understand how and why my parents cannot practice accountancy in Canada, their profession in the Philippines. It is also partly through this literature that I understand why my cousin came to Vancouver to work as a live-in caregiver, because there was no other option for her. I share these snippets of family history because I want to emphasize that for many of us who do Filipino-Canadian studies, particularly those of Filipino descent, we are motivated to do so partly because of our personal and political desire to understand how and why we are here. That our lives are shaped by decisions not just at the scale of the individual and the family, but also by decisions made nationally and transnationally as nation states decide policies at the international scale, same with development and migration policies, as well as supranational organizations like the WTO and the UN, and non-governmental organizations as they attempt to influence the shape of global circuits of lives, landscapes, and livelihoods. So in a case of you can run but you cannot hide, my participation in Filipino-Canadian studies is characterized by a double positioning. I find myself both as a research subject and an academic interlocutor. This double position is a joyous but an uneasy one. It is joyous because it allows me to see myself in relation to communities with whom I share and do not share experiences. It is uneasy for that exact same reason. Refusing a singular and essentialist Filipino-ness, my participation in it is an attempt to understand differences within the Filipino-Canadian community as well. It is in this double affect of joy and dis-ease that lies the necessity for responsibility and accountability. To move away from documenting Filipino-Canadian lives as if they are caged zoo animals or plant specimen, towards unpacking and then challenging the social, political, cultural, and economic forces through which Filipino-Canadian lives are constituted as unequal subjects to each other and to others, in relation to a white settler nation founded upon colonial violence, histories of immigration, institutionalized racialization, environmental degradation, and transnational capital flows. So as Roland mentioned earlier, this book has been a labor of love. And I want to add that it has also been a labor of mentorship. And I want to name that and recognize that, its goals and its effects. I want to celebrate the labor of mentorship because I understand this book as a critique of erasure. We describe in the introduction to this book erasure as a set of practices and discourses through which Filipino bodies are rendered either invisible or hypervisible. I quote, "Invisible because numerous kinds of people, problems, and achievements are ignored, and hypervisible because only the stereotypes are deemed relevant and significant for public circulation." End quote. Both have the effect of circumscribing the diverse lives of Filipino Canadians into a very limited set of tropes and figures, among them the nanny, the nurse, and the gangster. In the context of this limited framing, we wanted to take seriously how these tropes are produced through public and policy discourse and practices, at the same time that we want to mess up and mess with what Chimamanda Adichie calls in her popular lecture about mythologies of Africa, this danger of the single story. We do this by profiling in diverse and contested ways of being and becoming Filipino-Canadian subjects. In many ways, most of the book responds to these processes of erasure by politicizing and contesting, for example. And I'm going to name some of the chapters in the book. Racist, police, and state violence, processes of deprofessionalization, the deletion of Filipinos from academic curricula and popular pedagogy, and the increasing relegation of Filipinos to the category of disposable, temporary, and abject beings. In talking back, we hope to occupy a central space through which our voices and views can be heard and appreciated. In this spirit, the practice of mentorship that was instrumental to the gestation of this book and its release today is part of that talking back. It makes mentorship, therefore, a political practice. I understand it to be an active refusal to be erased from academic and public discourse, as well as an insistence on making space to nurture and care for voices that are often undervalued, if not utterly silenced, sometimes barely alive, if not made dead. From the very beginning, as we were conceiving this book, we approached it as an opportunity for those of us with less experience to learn from those with more. It was partly through learning from Bonnie and Roland and others who, with more experience that I came to acquire skills in editing, and also to take in the comments that I received from my chapter from my peers. And this engagement has been a wonderful occasion to engage in conversation with the amazing work of my colleagues, and I thank them for that. Several contributors to this book come from challenging political and socioeconomic contexts, including personal histories of coming to Canada through the Live-In Caregiver Program, holding down multiple jobs to support family members while finishing masters and PhDs and undergrads, sending part of scholarships and TA checks back to family members to help them make ends meet. Not to mention lived experiences of classist, racist, sexist, homophobic, and anti-immigrant violence. So for those of us who find ourselves subject to multiple forms of erasure, claiming a space in academia, even momentarily through a one-off contribution in this book, is a refusal of erasure. Mentorship, as I understand it then, is part of this refusal. And I thank my co-editors and contributors for helping create a space for sometimes difficult, often challenging, but always necessary dialogue and debate. One last thing. I'm almost finished. I want to end my section in the political spirit of the final chapter of the book, which my colleagues Manel Matani and David Roberts here, where they challenge scholars of Filipino-Canadian studies to not be provincial in their claims to justice, but to link Filipino-Canadian struggles with the struggles of other marginalized groups. And I want to use this opportunity in front of you to address two interrelated issues that require our solidarity work. The first is access to post-secondary education. Or I should say that the increasing inaccessibility of it to many people. University administrators and ministries of education, particularly in this province, have mastered the language of austerity to roll back funding and to roll out mechanisms for privatization, commercialization, and increasing tuition and other fees. It has also led to increasing reliance on international students as sort of cash cows for universities who are strapped for cash because of inadequate university funding. I want to draw your attention to the case of two international students from the University of Regina, Ihoma Amadi and Victoria Ordu, who are under deportation orders back to Nigeria because they took jobs at the local Walmart in contravention of their visas. With the help of scholarships from their country of origin, Ihoma and Victoria are paying international student fees to the University of Regina. Fees that are up to 3 times as much as domestic student fees. They are the type of students that the Conservative government has sought to capitalize on when it released the document International Education, a key driver of Canada's Future Prosperity, and that was released in August of this year. Criminalizing them for taking jobs that pay a pittance in relation to their exorbitant tuition fees is all the more hypocritical and unacceptable given that the Conservative government has increasingly championed temporary foreign workers to deal with labor shortages, particularly in Central and Western Canada. Ihoma and Victoria are currently seeking sanctuary in a church in Regina. And to this I say education, not deportation. Shame on Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Shame on Citizenship and Immigration Minister Jason Kenney. Shame on Public Safety Minister Vic Taves. Which leads me to my second interrelated point, the increasing number of temporary contract workers in Canada, which includes many Filipinos who work in the tar sands industry in Alberta, but also workers from other parts of Southeast Asia, Central and South America, and the Caribbean. These workers are placed in often precarious positions. We've seen this in the news in the form of temporary farm workers dying in car accidents. We've also seen it in the ways that temporary workers have died on the hands of their employers. In this way, temporary workers are often seen as disposable workers. They have little access to healthcare, and what little they have is being clawed back in the name of austerity. They have little recourse to protection from harmful pesticides, from unsafe working conditions, or from unscrupulous employers. It is a shame that the Conservative government has increasingly promoted the use of temporary workers, whose labors are mined, but who are sent back and disposed of once they are not needed anymore. Shame. Shame. On that note, let us celebrate achievements, small and large. These achievements are forms of resistance. Resistance and of daring to survive in a context where we are constantly erased. And on that note, maraming salamat. Thank you very much for indulging me in front of you, and I turn it over to Ato.